I know people are like listening to this. This guy is definitely getting paid by Big Pharma because he's like overzealous about these men. They're incredible. I've never seen anything like it.
Hey everyone, I'm Morgan, co-founder of Primal Kitchen and host of the Primal Kitchen podcast. Today, I'm super excited to be chatting with Dr. Spencer Nadolsky. Dr. Nadolsky is a board-certified obesity and lipid specialist and the medical director for one of the largest online medical obesity treatment programs called Sequence. Before we get started, a brief reminder that any and all opinions and views shared by hosts and guests on this podcast are the speaker's own and do not represent the view of Primal Kitchen or its affiliates or parent company. Hello, Dr. Nadolsky. Welcome. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm so excited. This whole GLP-1 medication, Ozempic, trend is just, it seems like sweeping the world right now. And I've been dying to talk to just an expert in the weight loss space on your take on the whole thing. So before we get into it, why don't you just give the audience a little background on how you got into being an obesity specialist?
Yeah, I grew up in a very educated, athletic minded family. So I used a lot of nutrition, exercise science to be a good athlete. Went and ended up playing football and wrestled in college. I was at UNC Chapel Hill, was their heavyweight, did pretty well there. But I went to medical school thinking I don't really want to deal with performance. I want to help people take a fraction of my passion and for prevention of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes and that type of thing. So I went into actually family medicine, which looking back, maybe not the right move. It doesn't really matter because I'm doing what I love now, but did family medicine, which is extremely broad, and then specialized down into obesity medicine and also something called lipidology, study of lipid, like cholesterol, triglyceride metabolism, and how to help people with those disorders. So I do what I would consider cardiometabolic medicine, cardiometabolic disease medicine.
Cool.
Yeah. So, but then to further that, I thought the current healthcare system is archaic. So I really obviously the internet, it's going to just keep going the way it is. Obviously, you know that we're doing this podcast all on the internet, but having to treat people in person and having people taking a day off of work just to go to the doctor is just so archaic to me. So I've worked with a few startup companies to then deliver telemedicine online before it was cool. Before the pandemic and everything. So I've been doing that full time since late 2016, early 2017.
Oh, wow. So you don't have a practice in person.
I'm all in the cloud.
Cool.
All in the cloud.
Yeah. I mean, really, it's just blood work and having a conversation and getting biometric markers, I would imagine, that are pretty easy to do.
Yeah,
remote.
depends.
That's cool.
So acute care, you want to see somebody and evaluate them. If someone's I got abdominal pain and, or some, cough and you want to listen to their lungs, although there are little devices you can put on their back where they're at home and you can actually listen to their lungs. It's getting crazy. But for chronic care like obesity, it is made for the internet because there's a lot of people, a lot of patients who they've been into doctors, they've been shamed, they force them to stand on the scales and kind of feel bad about themselves and maybe didn't have chairs that fit them in the waiting room and all that type of stuff. So people with obesity tend to, at least that I've seen, prefer not having to go in. So that's what I do.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. So your practice has just exploded online and give me the lowdown. What is your treatment protocol looking like these days? I mean, I have so many questions, but let's just start there. What do you specialize in or how are you treating people?
Yeah. So if you look at obesity treatment or medicines over the course of however many years, it hasn't been that great. There's something called phentermine, which is decent. It's a sympathomimetic, amphetamine-like, but not addictive. That increases your norepinephrine, noradrenaline, and can help with appetite. But the problem is it's a controlled medicine. You can't do that online. There are some laws right now they're trying to work with because of the pandemic and all this, and some people do it. But in general, the FDA doesn't like that, what's called monotherapy by itself. So it's only approved for 12 weeks at a time. There is a combination phentermine topiramate drug that is approved indefinitely, but still it's controlled. But with these new GLP-1s, the specifically semaglutide Wegovy was approved in 2021. Now, many people know it as Ozempic. Ozempic's the name brand for type 2 diabetes, but it's really the same stuff that's also in Wegovy, which is approved for specifically obesity, not type 2 diabetes. And it's a little bit higher of a dose, 2.4 milligrams instead of the now 2 milligrams in Ozempic. With the advent of that and getting a much higher margin of weight, total body weight loss, that's where it was like, okay, I think we should start doing this online, because the older drugs, there was something also called Contrave, which is a bupropion. People know it as a smoking cessation or antidepressant medicine. They combined that with naltrexone, which is known for alcohol cessation, alcohol cravings. They combined them, and that gets like around 6% weight loss. Not a lot, and there's a lot of side effects from that medicine, and it doesn't work that well. So that's what we had online. And with these newer GLP-1 medicines, all of a sudden you get, instead of like with Qsimia, which you can't do online, which is around 10, 11% weight loss, now we got like 15% weight loss, which is like, okay, it's starting to turn heads in 2021. So that's where we decided, hey, well, let's start figuring this out to do this like a comprehensive obesity clinic online. And so we don't just like schlep, medicines all over the place. There are places that just, you come in, you pay, you get a prescription.
Yeah, they're like, here's your prescription for Ozempic.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. So the ideal situation is we make a comprehensive, like what you'd see at a university, where you go in and get a comprehensive obesity plan. You see a dietitian, you have fitness workout plans, and all of that in being tailored to that person and monitored closely. So our big thing is we want to utilize these GLP-1 medicines because they're the most effective, and give them a comprehensive lifestyle plan with it and monitor them closely. So the one that we try to use is called Wegovy. It is approved for obesity. There were some issues with stock, and that's kind of why a lot of people started talking about Ozempic, because they couldn't get Wegovy, so they're just getting...
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, that's part of this whole conversation.
So you like Wegovy better than Ozempic, huh?
I mean, I like them both because they're the same drug.
Yeah.
You should see my Instagram. People get so confused. And I wrote this. I had a little article published in Women's Health magazine. I went over all the myths, and it's like, hey, people keep saying this is a type 2 diabetes drug. And it's like, yeah, Ozempic is technically labeled that way, but it's literally the same drug. It's semaglutide. It's a GLP-1, for anybody listening, glucagon-like peptide 1 agonist that is in... It's the way the FDA labeled them. So they're the same drug, but ideally we would use the Wegovy just because it's, labeled that way through the FDA. But honestly.
But I mean, that's kind of like semantics. I mean, when we're talking type 2 diabetes and obesity, like these things go hand in hand. I mean, come on.
Yeah. So the issue is it went viral. So this Ozempic's been out since 2017. And only now people are hearing about it. And the reason partly maybe because Wegovy came out in 2021. So they're like, wow, this is a weight loss drug? Whoa, that's pretty cool. So then... Oh,
okay. So once they launched it as a weight loss drug, it got all this attention. When it was launched as a diabetes treatment, it was kind of like under the radar.
And then the manufacturer, there was something issue with the manufacturing of the pens are different. The way they inject, they're slightly different.
They're shots, right? They're shots.
Yeah. Subcutaneous,
they're injectable. Right? Okay.
Teeny tiny little needles that go right under your skin. People are like, oh, I don't want to get a shot, but it's like nothing. The technology is amazing now. So subcutaneous goes right on your skin, teeny tiny needles. The pens are slightly different. Ozempic, you can actually do these clicking, and you can actually do in between doses. Not that anybody knows to do that.
Okay.
Whereas with Wegovy, it's just you have to go the dose. That's
the whole thing
that's given out. Yeah. So there was an issue with the pen manufacturing, which caused Wegovy to go out of stock. People couldn't get it anymore. So then I think it then went viral on things like TikTok and Instagram, where people were like, I'm getting my Ozempic now for weight loss. Elon Musk tweets out about semaglutide, which is both Ozempic and Wegovy. So that, people are now, and then Hollywood picks it up. People are then using it for vanity weight loss. Like when we talk about treating obesity, we're thinking we want to treat somebody to lose weight for their health gain, not just strictly being thinner, but Hollywood, oh gosh, I can lose 10, 20 pounds without really thinking about it. Sign me up. So that's where all of a sudden, whether we like it or not, doctors are going to give it out, to patients who come in demanding for it, whether that's good or bad. Yeah. So that's what happened. Yeah. I mean, I don't agree with it, but.
And you're using it to treat people who have truly diagnosed obesity?
Yeah. So we have a quiz on our website. If anybody's listening, it's called Sequence. The website's joinsequence.com. So if you go, you can't just go in and go like, all right, give me some semaglutide. You have to go through a quiz, an intake, and then on top of that, the provider, whether it's a physician or a nurse practitioner, will look through and decide whether this person is actually if it's indicated. And then we talk back and forth if it's on the border, because we really want to make sure we're giving it to people that it should
People
be
who need
indicated
it.
for. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Interesting. So what are the side effects?
Yeah. So this is where people are like, oh, this sounds amazing. Sign me up. But wait, there's black box warnings on these things. There's got to be a downside. So these drugs overall are tolerated extremely well. It's what makes for a great drug. And I don't want to sound like a big pharma shill. And you can look it up. I always have to say, because everybody's listening, like, how much is this guy getting paid from big pharma? You can look it up. It's all available online. It's the Sunshine Act, where you can actually look on the whatever CMS thing, and you can look up Nadolsky. I think I got paid $35 a few years ago for a lunch that I had with somebody. Anyway,
Oh my God, crazy.
yeah. The side effects are, these drugs are good because they have a huge amount of benefit with much fewer side effects, and also rarely any interactions. Like, they don't interact with anything other than if somebody's on insulin, you want to make sure that their blood sugars aren't going too low, that type of thing. But
Got it.
otherwise, people have inflammatory bowel disease. They're on Humira and all these different types of weird drugs, HIV drugs, whatever. And I'm the medical director, so they come and, can we use it with this medicine? And it's pretty much yes, anything, because it doesn't interact. It can change the absorption potentially because it slows down the GI tract of some oral drugs. So you do monitor those things, but in generally no interaction. So the side effects are, nausea is number one, absolutely number one.
Okay.
Slows down your GI tract. That may have something to do with it. There may be parts of the brain that also it causes nausea. For most people, though, it resolves pretty
So it's
readily.
like a short-term, like adjustment type of just kind of body's getting used to it.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's kind of an interesting thing. Some people, there's a very small percentage of people that I've noticed that gets severe nausea. Those are the people where we try to lower the dose further. Some people, you can't lower the dose anymore. Obviously, if they're on that Wegovy, you can't go lower. If they're on Ozempic, technically you can do the clicks with the pen, which is kind of interesting. You can give a lower dose than what's usually given. But if that doesn't work, we can give something called Zofran. There's some anti-nausea medicines, but the goal isn't to just throw them on these medicines, then to give other medicines. I think,
Right.
Have you seen that t-shirt that says like, your doctor's giving you this medicine, so then you have to give this medicine to counteract that medicine's side effects to then, the goal is not to start putting people, we call it polypharmacy, like just giving tons of medicines. If somebody has to be on Zofran or an anti-nausea medicine long term, it's probably not the right medicine for that person. So
Zofran's that's what they give you when you have morning sickness, right?
Yeah,
a lot of like people who have that super severe.
Sometimes I've seen that given. They give it a lot of times for like cancer patients who are having chemotherapy, where they're just like, I can't eat, and so you want to make sure that they're eating. So Zofran, it's relatively safe, but it also that can have some effects on the heart, electricity.
And then you're just managing. No one wants that.
No,
one
it's
wants
like, I don't want to put people on more medicines.
Multiple medications.
Yeah,
no.
Exactly. So nausea is the most common, but it resolves for pretty much everybody. Very small percentage will just not be able to tolerate. It's very small though. Next most common thing I see is constipation. Prophylactically, I have people increase their water. It's a good thing to go walking and exercise anyway, but keeping your body moving. And then for people that aren't seeming to get enough fiber in their diet, psyllium husk seems to help. And then for most people, that's fine. There are a few other people that are like, I'm still constipated. And then there's some other little tricks that we can do. But there is sometimes some diarrhea that resolves pretty quickly, but you got to be careful, because if people are nauseous and having diarrhea, they get something called hypovolemia. They don't have enough fluid in their body, and then their kidneys could get hurt because there's not enough flow to the kidneys. And And then some other weird things like fatigue. We see some weird fatigue. Like people are I'm just tired and malaise. Very rare, but we see it once in a while. Some people have some urinary changes. Some people notice their periods change. And they don't have a history of PCOS, because PCOS could technically improve if they're losing weight with the medicine and maybe they start getting periods again. But some of that stuff it's very rare, and it's actually not reported in the trials. And but we have a very large clinic to where I'm monitoring all the side effects, and I actually message the.
So you're doing your own trial here.
Yeah, and we can't publish it. I wish I should get a researcher on so we could get it IRB approved, but like I'll message the manufacturer. We have a liaison at the manufacturers going, hey, have you guys looked at the data? And they're like, we didn't see anything in the trials. And it's like, but I'm seeing signals in some of these weird side effects that it's rare, but like we have more people in our. It's
good to know.
Yeah. So it's interesting. The thing that people worry about is thyroid cancer, because there's a big black box warning that says thyroid cancer, and it's seen in rats. Rats have these different cells in their thyroid that actually have receptors for GLP-1, whereas humans don't have these receptors. So it's an interesting thing. The rats did have what's called hyperplasia, increasing in cells in those specific type of thyroid cells. And it's a very rare type of thyroid cancer called medullary thyroid cancer, very rare. So it's seen in rats, and it hasn't been seen in humans. They're monitoring it. There's some observational trials. There's data going. It looks like maybe there's a bump up in increase, but from my standpoint, like I wouldn't like. I always do the family. Would I prescribe this to a family member? And I would absolutely prescribe it to a family member. I would personally take it if I struggled. So I don't worry about the. Seen in rats, though, they have different cells that do have the receptors on their cells, whereas we don't. So that's a big thing. You'll see the black box warning. Other people worry about pancreatic cancer, pancreatitis. So these medicines, GLP-1, they originally made for type 2 diabetes. They actually help the pancreas make more insulin, only in a glucose-dependent manner. So they won't just, if you take it and don't eat, you're not going to go hypoglycemic. Your blood sugars aren't going to go too low. Once you eat food, it should help your pancreas make more insulin to help regulate your blood sugars. So because there's GLP-1 receptors on the pancreas, there's always worry of like, how is this messing with the pancreas? So we don't see a signal of pancreatic cancer, at least so far. Pancreatitis looks like with placebo versus the active GLP-1s, whether it's semaglutide or any of the other GLP-1s, there doesn't seem to be a signal. But I think it's a possible that when people lose weight, they can also form gallstones. When people lose a lot of weight, changes the mixture of the bile. And so you can form stones. And if those stones go out the gallbladder and get into the pancreas, that could cause pancreatitis. So I would say that would be the worry. Other than that, those are like the scary things, but we don't see thyroid cancer, and I wouldn't worry about the pancreas issues. If you have a pancreatitis in the past and you don't know what it was from, we don't prescribe it. But like if somebody had pancreatitis from a gallstones, which is not common, but that's what a common cause of pancreatitis. If they got their gallbladder taken out, I wouldn't worry about taking this medicine. So those are the major things. Otherwise, really well tolerated, like pretty remarkable medicines.
Any benefits besides weight loss?
Yeah. So
like, is it showing anything, I don't know, positive?
Yeah. So this is where you start reading these anecdotes, and I think they're going to take these anecdotes and then hopefully do studies on them. Alcohol, people that crave alcohol, like, and want to drink it, whether or not they have obesity or type 2 diabetes, the medicine seems to have an effect. At least these newer ones like called semaglutide. There's some of the older ones called liraglutide, which is a once a day. Semaglutide's its younger, bigger brother. And then there's one called tirzepatide, which is even more powerful.
Yeah, I
But
want to talk to you about that one because I feel like that's an
yeah,
interesting new
yeah,
thing. So anyway, we
we
can
can
go
talk
back to
about
that
that.
next.
Yeah,
But
so there.
so they're seen. So for someone who might be struggling with like alcohol addiction, there might be some benefit.
Yes, and there's receptors in the way these work for weight loss. So we talked about how they kind of help with blood sugars. They can help augment the pancreas's insulin secretion. They decrease something called glucagon, which is another hormone that increases your blood sugar, and it also slows down gastric emptying. But then overall, people start losing weight, and so they improve their insulin sensitivity and blood sugars improve. But for weight loss specifically, the receptors in the brain that are related to satiety. Satiety is how we feel, satiated in between meals. And there's also an effect. Everybody listening to this has had probably some point in their life where they ate at a good dinner. They're full. They ate their, whatever, chicken and broccoli, eggs and whatever, and they're still craving something sweet despite feeling satiated.
Yeah. I had that last night. I ate like 4 Thin Mint Girl Scout cookies, which we like never have in our house. And I'm like, why am I craving these right now? Like I never eat that kind of stuff. But yeah, I had that last night. Okay. So this turns that off.
You were just supporting the Scouts though.
Yeah, that's true. I'm breastfeeding, so I like excuse all manner of dietary issues at this point in my life because I'm on like this is my like free period.
Yes, that's right.
My perk of having a baby. Anyway, carry on.
So I think
it helps with those cravings.
It knocks those things out of the park, and I think that's just as important as the satiety effect, because so people know, and people are listening to this going like, some people may not understand obesity and be like, I don't understand why they can't just,
exercise more,
and eat more vegetables and
Yeah.
protein, right? If you listen to my patients, I like interviewing them and doing podcasts and stuff, because what they'll describe is the food noise. They're like, I know, and we have dietitians that struggle with obesity. They're like, I know that protein and vegetables, I can fill up with that, but like, there's this signal that it's just telling me to eat the cookies, eat whatever, the Thin Mints, anything, pie, cakes, the chips, the potato chips. And it's such a strong signal, and it's like an itch that you can ignore it, but you finally have to scratch. So like, think about going, people are working right now, they might be listening to this going, I work in an office, and I would call it Donut Dan. I love Donut Dan brings in donuts to the break room, and you're trying to eat your salmon and your whatever it is, and Donut Dan brings those in. You're like, no, I'm still losing weight. I'm gonna ignore it. And some people can. So there's a small percentage of people that they're fine with it, but there's a lot of people out there. They have these strong signals that just they can't stay away for that long. This medicine just knocks it out. And what they describe is that like, and I did a video. I don't know if you saw this. My little analogy to the Matrix, where Morpheus is talking to Neo, and basically Neo's like, are you saying that like I'm going to be able to dodge bullets or something? And Morpheus says, no, when you realize you're the one, you won't have to dodge the bullets. And so then I switched to the scene where he's dodging bullets, and then switch to another scene where the Smiths are shooting at him. And I talk about the analogy where those bullets are basically the food around us. And when you get these newer GLP-1s, you can just kind of stop the bullets. And you can choose to kind of touch them or pick them up and eat them or not. And so people describe they enjoy the food still. So it's not like, oh, these foods are disgusting to me. Like, they still like them, but they can choose to have them or not have them.
Yeah. Yeah. They have a healthier relationship with those things. It's so interesting.
It is. It's weird. So then
how is it working? Like, what's it doing? I don't even understand. How is it doing this?
Yeah.
It sounds like sorcery.
Yeah. So this is where when people don't understand like obesity, like just eat less, move more. There are these powerful transmitters and signals in our brain that basically control, like, we want to think we have like complete free will, but the way that our brain works, we're wired in certain ways. And some people that struggle, most people that struggle with obesity have this hard wiring and strong signals that kind of drive them one way or another. So for me, I'm a naturally leaner guy. I can eat. I just got I did doubly labeled water, which if anybody knows what it is, it's the way to really know your total daily energy expenditure. And it says I was burning like 4,800 calories per day. So it's like, I can go eat pizza and whatever. And like, and I get satiated pretty easily. But I could eat a little bit more. There are people that are walking around that are very lean that don't understand. Like they have the normal satiety signals and reward signals to where like they can eat a piece of pizza, be done with it. They could eat a piece of cake and be done. Other people, they just can't shut it off. So these drugs work in the parts of the brain that then send signals further and further and further throughout the brain that make them more like that person that doesn't have to worry about their weight. It's, again, I know people are like listening to this. This guy is definitely getting paid by big pharma because he's like overzealous about these medicines. They're incredible. I've never seen anything like it. So,
well, it's interesting you say that because, oh, sorry, go on. Finish.
No, I was just going to say that. So alcohol is also in those parts of the brain. So we think of like it's just cake and whatever, but like smoking, alcohol, even like other addictive like things, gambling, shopping sprees, people are starting to go like, yeah, I've noticed I'm not doing XYZ as much anymore. So there's clearly some overlap in those other addictive like behaviors and food. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's really then like almost kind of, I guess they're all categorized the same, right? Like it is, obesity could be looked at as a food addiction you're dealing with. I mean, if it's kind of solving that issue. So that's fascinating. But you bring up, for those who are just listening and can't like see you visually and just maybe don't know much about you, you are also a huge proponent of like lifestyle for weight loss and kind of walk the talk yourself. So you're not just someone who's like sitting over here overweight, like just to throw medicine at it. I mean, you're like big into lifting weights. Tell me some of the other things, like lifestyle things that you...
Yeah. So here's what we'd want. In an ideal world, we'd like to go back to what we were doing decades ago, right? We were eating whole foods. We were very active, and we didn't have a high prevalence of obesity. There were still variances in body weight. There's still people that are a little bit bigger, and this is related to genetics. I don't know if anybody saw the 60 Minutes thing where it's like the person, the physician, who's very smart, by the way, but it made it seem like, hey, if you have the genetics for obesity, you're kind of screwed. And it's like, well, that's not actually true. We literally we have, before this current environment, when people didn't have this high prevalence of obesity, and we have studies showing you can actually minimize the effect of the genetics with lifestyle. So in an ideal situation, we would have people eat more whole, satiating, lower calorie foods, leaner protein, lots of high voluminous vegetables and other produce, whatever. That's the ideal situation. And so we, from a behavioral standpoint, in this environment, this obesogenic environment, you try to teach people to navigate it, right? So like, if anybody's listening, they're like a coach, and they're like, okay, try, instead of going to McDonald's, maybe you should have, and you're hungry when you go home, and you notice you go to McDonald's because you're hungry, and you hear it, and you see it, and maybe you can smell it. Try to have some type of food before going home. So you try to teach these things, or maybe take a different way home. It's interesting. One of our dietitians, she had to put her purse in the trunk because that was one way to deter her from going to the fast food. And people like
drive through on her way home. Yeah.
And people are like, that sounds crazy, but that's how our brains work when it's there and we see it. It's very powerful stuff. So ideally we'd get people active. We'd get them lifting weights 2 to 3 times a week. We'd get them walking a ton. I wish all my patients could walk, 10,000 steps or however many steps that they can. Lift 2 or 3 times a week, maybe 4 times a week. Get some aerobic activity in there and play, do whatever they like recreationally. That's fun. But, we live in this world now where the environment kind of makes that tough when we have stress. You have kids, like we have kids that are really making things tough. We got life, we're married, we got jobs and all sorts of stress.
We're all stuck in front of the computer all day.
Yeah.
I mean, we aren't working manual labor jobs. A lot of us listening are stuck in front of the computer all day. Yeah.
So I like to say that these drugs aren't like these drugs basically help people do what they already know they need to do without what I would say white knuckling it, where it's like, oh my God, this is miserable. I'm going to keep doing this, but this is miserable. It takes
And
the
it's
edge
not
off.
sustainable.
Yeah, it just takes the
Yeah.
edge off to where it's like, oh, I can do this now. And so for those who are listening that are like, they don't have any issues doing the lifestyle. I don't take medicines to keep myself this lean. I have, no worries. And there is a small percentage of people that will be able to do it without medicine. But if the people have been struggling, they've had the best coaches, they've tried the best lifestyles, and they know what to do. They just can't do it because the signals are strong. They have this itch. They just have to keep scratching. And then what that itch is food, whatever it is, whatever is causing it, whether it's wiring the brain or you're coping with stress from a young age using food as a mechanism to do that. Medicine basically blocks that signal to where you can do what you know is the right way. So that's the gist of it. But like, yeah, ideally we'd get everybody just hammering lifestyle. But the reality is there's a lot of people that just unfortunately, like, I don't know, what do you do? Let them flounder or help them get a tool that helps them do the lifestyle, So that's my stance.
And there is so much like shame, right? It's like,
Yeah.
then you're stuck in this like shame cycle of like, I want to eat better, but I can't. And then I can do it for a few days and then I don't do it again. And then I'm embarrassed and then I feel like a failure. And it's just like a self-perpetuating, just kind of depressing downward cycle. I mean, how many like weight loss historically is like you lose weight and you gain it back. You lose weight and you gain it back. I mean, that's just how it kind of goes. So it's very interesting. What do you think about people who are like microdosing some of these medications, like who maybe don't have obesity issues?
So yeah, it's a great ethical question. So this was posed on Twitter. I was getting into it with some of the scientists about like, I wouldn't do it just simply because of the supply and demand. So we want to make sure there's enough supply for those who really need it. Now, let's say in just a utopia of a world. Well, in a utopia of a world, hopefully it would change our environment. But let's just say the environment's the way it is right now, and we can't dismantle big food and whatever else. So in that world where there's a flowing GLP-1s everywhere, it's in the water basically. Hypothetically, somebody could microdose it and just lower their appetite just slightly and their cravings and reward to where they would drop down about 10, 20 pounds from what their baseline is. The risk of it though, like if you stop doing that, the risk is then you would start regaining the weight just because you wouldn't even think about it. It'd be subconscious. You'd be like an extra little bite of here and there, an extra little this here and there. Your calories would start increasing without you thinking, unless you're in a metabolic kitchen where they're measuring every morsel of calories that go into your mouth, but we're human and subconsciously we eat more than we think we do. In fact, I thought I was only eating 3,500 calories. The test that I took showed I was eating more like 4,600. I was like, geez, that's a lot. So microdosing, yeah, I just specifically for, ethical concerns of supply, I would say no. Now, the other thing is it hasn't really been studied in like normal weight individuals. So is there a potential signal of harm that would outweigh any benefit? It's possible, but these are safe drugs. So like my guess is no, but if you were to come off of it and then you gained your weight back and you say, I want to go back on it, then what we see is what you described before, that weight cycling. The risk, and I know people listening to this appreciate lean muscle mass, the risk would be you lose weight and a percentage of that will be muscle. And then when you regain the weight, maybe a smaller percent of what you regain will be muscle and lean mass. So if you keep weight cycling, your body compositions will start shifting unfavorably, if that makes sense. That would be the risk. Whether that happens, I can't say for sure because we haven't done the studies, but that's my guess.
Interesting. So here's my question. Like, I feel like weight loss drugs is just like reminds me, I don't know, I'm like a child of the 80s, right? So it's like Slim Fast. And then I feel like there was like stuff on the market where it'd be like this weight loss drug. And then like, 6 months later, like everyone's dropping dead of heart attacks and they're like pulling stuff off the market. So like these are new drugs. Are they, how how are we worried about this sort of backfiring? Like, how do you wrestle with there not being really any long-term data on it? Or is there long-term data on this class of drugs?
Great question, because like this podcast is going to live on for a long time. And if something were to happen, they're going to be like, that shill doctor was just promoting the heck out of these drugs and he was wrong. He better eat a shoe. So fen was one of the drugs that you're kind of describing in the 90s, very popular. Phentermine, which is the OK component that's still FDA approved, they combined with something called fenfluramine. Fenfluramine was a serotonin agonist, and it hit one of the receptors, HT2B, in a way that these receptors were on heart valves, and it caused some people to have valvulopathies, floppy valves. And so obviously that's not good. And so they took that right off the market. So a lot of doctors were prescribing that. So they're like burned, and people remember that. And that you're remembering that. You may not have known the name, but that's one that burned a lot of people, patients and physicians. So what would make this any different? Well, these drugs have been out for they're getting close to 2 decades. The first one was approved in 2005 for type 2 diabetes, called exenatide, or Byetta. It was a twice-a-day injection. Then we had Victoza, which is liraglutide, once-a-day injection. Then eventually there was dulaglutide, which is a once-a-week, and then semaglutide. And now we have tirzepatide, the newest one.
Which we still haven't talked about, which we need to do.
Yeah, we will absolutely talk about that. So there have been studies looking at some of these older versions, maybe not these newer ones, but some of these older versions that liraglutide showed to decrease cardiovascular risk in those at high risk of type 2 diabetes. And so did dulaglutide. And semaglutide seems to be favorable as well. So at least from a cardiovascular standpoint, seems to be safe. Whether there's some weird cancer thing, and we don't see the signal now, but if it's like, oh my gosh, people are getting this, but we haven't seen it yet in almost 2 decades of data for at least the older ones, and they all hit the GLP-1 receptor. So we would assume, unless there's some offshoot,
similar.
Yeah, you would think so. Unless there's some drugs can have other offshoot effects beyond what its main mechanism are, because the way that they change the peptide, and so it's possible. I don't think so. I'll put my stamp down that I think overall very safe, and I would take them, and I would recommend to family members. But if somebody's listening to this in like 20 years saying like, that guy was wrong, then sorry, but I don't think so, honestly.
I mean, but that's kind of science and medicine, isn't it? Like everything changes in 20 years. Yeah. Interesting. I mean, the risk reward thing you mentioned is really interesting to me, because if you are suffering from like severe obesity, or even obesity in general, I mean, you're at a heightened risk for like every metabolic disease. I mean, they're calling Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes, right? Like, I mean, so at a certain point, it's like, if there isn't a glaring risk, there has to just be a lot of benefit that would outweigh any risk we may or may not know. But I hear you. If you're someone who's just using this for the last vanity 5-10 pounds, you might want to reconsider, or just think a little bit harder about it. The risk reward thing might not, be there for as much, but interesting. Okay. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about this. What's the other one? The newest one you mentioned. Tirzepatide? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay. So, what's the deal with this?
Just like the technology, this is just, these scientists are incredible. I wish I could go and work with them in a lab and do this with them, because what they did was these are peptides, these GLP-1 agonists. There's another what's called incretin. Incretin stands for the intestinal secretion of insulin. This is what they called the effect when they didn't know the exact incretins that were in the body. They just knew there was this effect because they'd inject glucose into the veins versus people ingesting it, and the insulin in those people who ingested it went higher than if they injected glucose, which you're like, wow, they injected glucose straight to the veins and the insulin didn't go as high. You would think it'd go right to the pancreas, but there was something about it going through the intestines. So they said incretin, intestinal secretion of insulin. Anyway, they've found ways to finally develop this stuff to where it didn't get broken down as readily in the body. And because regular endogenous GLP-1 that you secrete yourself is within minutes, it's gone. So they found ways to make these peptides where they didn't get broken down as easily. That's the gist of it. And throughout these years, they found ways for them to stick around longer and maybe hit the receptors differently. And that's where we got semaglutide once a week, pretty strong, 15% weight loss. Tirzepatide, though, they found a way to combine two incretins. There's GLP-1 and something called GIP, glucose insulinotropic polypeptide, glucose-dependent insulinotropic polypeptide. Doesn't matter what it's called, but GLP-1 and GIP. And so they put these things together and wow, people are having even better glucose control. You have two incretins together that have separate effects, lowering blood sugar. Well, then they looked at it in those with obesity. Instead of just 15%, which you saw with semaglutide, now we're looking at more like 21%. It just added an extra, it essentially added as much to this already amazing drug that we saw with some of the older drugs of how much weight loss they got. So 21%, we're starting to get close to bariatric surgery level, which is, somewhere around 30%. And that's what they did. And there's debate about how the GIP actually helps with the weight loss. The latest, and I talked to some of these researchers on Twitter because I just find it interesting. I use this clinically in patients, but like the mechanisms and the bench research, I'm not in the lab looking at little cells, but they think that the GIP actually helps with a decreased internalization of the GLP-1 receptor. So ultimately, it helps the GLP-1. It augments the effects of GLP-1 a little bit more. Interesting stuff. It just regardless of it, it's a powerful compound. And right now, it's only approved for type 2 diabetes, but I believe in a few months they're going to approve it for obesity specifically. So
interesting,
amazing.
Yeah, and these researchers, where are they researching for?
All over the world. Denmark.
Are they
Yeah.
Okay, but are they
here?
Work for the drug companies? Who do they work for?
Some of them
do.
Curious. Yeah, some of them do work for. So Eli Lilly is who does Mounjaro, which is tirzepatide, and there's Novo Nordisk who does the semaglutide, and so the pipeline is really interesting. What they're doing is now there's one called a triple incretin or a triple G agonist, where they're going to combine GLP, GIP, and glucagon, and the glucagon component may actually be the first thing that increases our metabolic rate and may actually get more than this 21%. They're monitoring it. Who knows what the safety is? I don't know. We'll see when they do their phase 3 trials. There's another, Novo Nordisk is doing one where they combine cagrilintide, which is an amylin analog. It's another hormone that comes from the pancreas that has effects on satiety. So they're combining that with semaglutide. And the effects from that, it's going to blow the current, just regular semaglutide away by itself. And then another place is doing like a GLP-1 peptide with a backbone antibody to inhibit GIP, that other incretin. So you think if we have agonists that seem to help it, why would we inhibit it? Well, it turns out that inhibiting it also has a major effect. Crazy stuff. Anyway, that one also looks extremely promising, and there's a bunch of other things that they're coming out with. That I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see medicines that we're hitting bariatric surgery level results in a pen. Issue is going to be cost, so hopefully they can figure that out. But yeah, the future.
How long do they have patents on these? Do they have patents on these?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do.
And how long do patents last? Don't they last like what, 20 years, 30 years?
Well, no. So yeah, interestingly enough, so liraglutide, one of those older ones, it's supposed to be coming off patent soon, which it looks like it was like that was the once a day injection. That's supposed to be coming off patent soon.
It's already.
Yeah, it's been,
it's
whatever.
Like the technology's far surpassed that now, so it's
it is, but at least it would be generic. Yeah, I know it is. It's like they're just hitting levels that it's like, holy cow! It's like, when you get computers that you had and now we have these iPhones that can do anything and everything that computers had, however many years ago. It's like it's in our pocket. It's similar with this. Crazy.
Yeah, I mean, this is like really kind of like world-changing, cutting-edge type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if this proves to have a very, minimal side effect, a very safe profile, and then you got a huge percent of the population that's struggling with obesity. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just curious for you personally, because I know you're a bit of like a health nut yourself.
Yeah.
Moving away from the GLP-1 medication conversation, just some like rapid fire end of the podcast
Yeah.
questions for you. But aside from all of these medications, what are you most excited about in health and wellness these days?
Yeah. I think I like the shift of people understanding the effects of muscle and lifting weights. I think people are starting to understand that you don't have to just go out and do cardio all the time. I think people are lowering the barrier and getting people excited about lifting weights. I'm excited about that. I'm excited about also, I don't think we're going to be able to change our current environment. We keep talking about that. I don't think so. So I'm interested in food technologies that maybe, they may be ultra processed, but there may be ways to then help people eat fewer calories through certain foods. I'm kind of interested in that. And so those are the two
like
things.
what? Give me an example of that. I'm curious. Like,
well, so you know how
like monk fruit, or what do you mean?
I don't
like
so
stevia. Okay.
They've designed foods to be overeaten, right? So like,
yeah, totally.
I mean, once you
Addictive,
pop,
yeah.
you just can't stop. So
right.
I'm hoping, and I could be wrong, but I'm hoping, and the idea is out there that they will find ways to then change the technology to where they find ways that it still tastes good, but they're not eating as much of it. Now, that might seem ridiculous because that doesn't help with profits of some of these places, but I'm hoping that is a shift in how people think. It's a little crazy, but I don't think we're going to be able to regulate our way out of this and be like, hey, there's only vegetables at the store now. Like, you know what I mean? I don't think that's going to happen. I think if we're going to do something, it's going to be something like this. Plus, if people need, this medicine to navigate their way through, sure. But it would be nice to have something like this that would help.
Some other options. Yeah. Okay. What's the worst thing you've ever done for your own health personally?
So like, is this like a supplement? So I did a bodybuilding competition and I got extremely lean. And I was like starving. So like, I'm glad I went through the experience, but like I'm worried about a lot of people that go through this and get kind of addicted to it. I don't think it's super healthy to continually try to get as lean as possible. I think it probably has effects on, obviously your
metabolism.
I would say a lot of that.
Health.
I'd say mental health. I see a lot of people kind of addicted to it. And then, for women, I have a lot of women patients that got into it and they all lose their periods. Their bone density goes down because they're not having that estrogen component. And anyway, so I did it once and I would, I'll never, there's no way I'll never do it again. But I know people like it. And it's a hobby for people, but I think you got to be careful with that.
Yeah. Okay, aside from lifting weights, what's like a health hack you're doing that most people maybe aren't doing?
Yeah, I'd say, so this is going to sound funny, but this kind of goes into the technology. So I eat a lot of prepackaged, convenient type of foods because like we're all in this world where we're stressed and we don't have a lot of time. But if you can find ways to get healthful foods that are actually prepackaged, and that might seem like oxymoron, but it's not. There are these types of foods. That's what I do. I get a lot of my diet is prepackaged, convenient, but relatively healthful foods. So that's what I do.
Okay, I need examples. What is that?
Yeah, so like we'd have like riced cauliflower and stuff like that. There's like bags of this stuff. I can't remember if it's bird's eye or whatever, the green, whatever. I don't know. I just see them at the store. I'm like, holy cow. And at first they were like, these aren't that good, but now they're like flavoring them in ways. And it's like, it's just olive oil and a little bit of this and that with like vegetables. It's like, you have that. And then there's like ready to drink protein shakes and there's like lower fat cheeses that are like pretty much all protein, stuff like that, to where I'm like, all right, well, I might as well do this because it makes my life easier and it's nutritious and getting me the right kind of calories and that type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, we have come a long way in that. We forget how It was just a few short years ago when you couldn't buy rice, cauliflower, and spiralized veggie noodles at the grocery store.
Isn't that
wasn't that long ago.
No.
Yeah, we have made a lot of advancements just on what is, I think, consumers are voting with their dollars, and cauliflower certainly had its moment. So I hear you. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. My last question I ask everyone this. What is something most people don't know about you?
Oh, don't know about me. I'm not serious. I'm a very silly guy. Very silly. And they might notice that because of some of my posts, but like some of the times people get like kind of angry at sometimes of what I post, and I'm like messing around. Like, come on, like don't take this so seriously. Like, this is the internet.
Don't take me so seriously.
Yeah, I am. As people see me as this, like, athletic doctor guy, must be like this serious, whatever. But I am like 99% silly. When I'm serious, it's like, if somebody's having a heart attack and I'm trying to help them, I'm not doing that on the internet anymore. But when I was working in the hospital, that's a serious moment, helping a family through a death or whatever. But like a lot of times, I like to just be goofy. So that's. I
like that.
Yeah.
My Buddhist therapist would really like that. He's like, stop taking life so serious. Yeah. I'm like, yes, that's a good parting word for everyone. Okay. Let everyone know where they can find you and your company Sequence.
Yeah. So at Dr. Nadolsky on Twitter or Instagram. I think I'm at Dr. Spencer, Dr. Spencer on TikTok. If anybody's even on TikTok, there's a lot of people, but like,
they're on TikTok, believe me.
So I'm Dr. Spencer there, but Dr. Nadolsky on other platforms. And then Sequence, you can get us on social media at Join Sequence on all our platforms. And then you can go to joinsequence.com if you are interested in taking our quiz and interested in being evaluated for one of these GLP-1 medicines.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It was great learning from you today. Appreciate you taking the time with us.
Thanks for having me on.